Welcome back, everybody. Final half hour of our show on this Wednesday morning. The big news for Gopher football fans have been tipping over cars for the last 48 hours was the news on late Monday afternoon out of Jackson County Central, which is a team we know in this part of the world. They played Barnesville a couple years ago down in the state semis. Their stud, Roman Voss, announced that he is verbally committed to go play football at the University of Minnesota. That normally, would that be news around here? Yeah, he's a good player. It's bigger news. It's statewide news. It's region news because Minnesota beat out Alabama to get Voss to come to their school. There's only one man we need to talk about that, and that's our recruiting guy, Ryan Burns, who covers everything for Gopher football recruiting for Gopher Illustrated, and he's good enough to give us a few minutes. He's been everywhere, all over the airwaves the last couple days on this story. This is one that, Ryan, first off, it's great to see you, bud, that Gopher fans should spike the football on. I don't care however it comes about. They beat Alabama for a guy. They should celebrate for as long as they want, in my mind.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you having me on. And if there was any other place I'd rather be than this show, I'd rather be drifting spinners out on Lake of the Woods right now, maybe Upper Red, trying to see if I can't get an 18-inch walleye on the boat. But I think a lot of Gopher fans would tell you they feel like they just landed a 30-plus incher in that regard. So, yeah, it's been a very interesting recruiting cycle for PJ Fleck here over the last few weeks, and it culminated here earlier this week with Roman Voss choosing Minnesota. So
How long have they been on this in your mind? How long have they been working to get this kid to come to Minnesota?
Very long time. It's been over a year now since they became his first offer, that being the University of Minnesota. And I think if you were to ask me, and I've been doing this now 15 years of covering Gopher recruiting, this is one of the more interesting recruitments I've followed because Roman Voss is from Jackson, Minnesota, Lakefield, Minnesota, very much near the southern border there. And I think a lot of people in that area, if you were to ask them this time last year, would say that kid's going to go to Iowa, that kid's going to go to Nebraska. I don't know why the Gophers are kind of bothering here. Mm-hmm. But the way that Minnesota was able to kind of hang in there as then Iowa and Wisconsin came in, and then here this past winter and spring, you saw the more national brands, the historical blue bloods, the USCs and the Alabamas and the Oklahomas come in. And Minnesota just kept swinging, and they ultimately got to the final two where it was Minnesota and Alabama. And I'll also be the first one to tell you, there's a lot of connections between that now Alabama staff in the southern part of the state there because they're just, I think, about an hour and a half drive maybe from Sioux Falls, where Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb had a lot of success, and that part of the state certainly knows it. So not only is it beating Alabama here, it's beating all those connections to that part of the state where I would be the first one to tell you, and I'll tell you here again, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, that kid's not coming to the Twin Cities. That kid's going to go to Iowa, Nebraska, or in this instance, I think he would have chosen Alabama. Yeah. But the way that Minnesota's coaches kept swinging and they ultimately sold him on the Twin Cities, you can go 2.5 hours north and you can go away for college.
He may have come to SDSU or Fargo too, right? I mean, they would have been in that time frame that you're talking about, that the Bison and the Jackrabbits would have been interested as well.
Yeah, and he's got a brother in Rudy who I believe played at South Dakota State, and even 10, 15 years ago, the ability to find a Roman Voss in that era would have been much more difficult than it is in this day and age of 2025, where anybody can put a highlight on the internet and I can find it from Stanley, North Dakota to Kindred, North Dakota to wherever in between. It's so much easier in 2025 than it was in 2015, but yeah, it's a heck of a recruiting win for PJ Fleck and his staff.
You and I follow this stuff really closely, but for the average Gopher fan, is this, how big a deal have you registered over the last 2 days that they got this kid? Has it resonated with the fan that goes to Huntington Bank Stadium, but they only care about the Gophers on Saturdays?
Sure. Yeah, I think it has resonated. I think that not only is he the top player in the state, this is now the third consecutive year PJ has been able to land that. Now, I know it's technically 5 if you want to include Jackson Howard, who is now transferred back to the University of Minnesota. But let's stick with the facts being the facts and not get a little bit into the gray area. I think a lot of it, especially fans, can now see that, what does it mean? Coy Parrish electing to stay home back 18 months ago when Ryan Day is flying into Duluth Airport, which is going to be one of my favorite stories to tell for the next X amount of years, because I can't remember the last time that a blue blood head coach, the Friday before National Signing Day, is flying into Duluth. Look, I have spent a lot of time in Duluth in my life. I love grandmas. I love all the different little nuanced spots there. But when the head coach at Ohio State's flying into town there on his private jet to
Yep.
come see someone, it's a big deal.
Yep.
And you saw the impact that he can make. Now, it's a lot easier in my mind for a high school safety to make an impact immediately than it might be a collegiate tight end. But I'm not doubting anything against Roman Voss. But certainly the amount of text messages or if you want to talk about traffic on wherever it is, has certainly gone up. Where I
Yep.
think the casual fan sees the number one kid stays home again. But not only that, it's you beat Alabama for
Yep.
him.
Yep. That's a big deal. They're also waiting today, I believe, on the number 4 kid in the state of Minnesota, and Peterson, who plays out of Triton High School, which is in Dodge Center. It's between Minnesota and Penn State. We were visiting off air on this. What's your gut tell you about his decision today?
Yeah, we'll see what he ends up deciding. If you ask me to go with my gut, I would tell you it's probably going to be Penn State. Penn State sees him as more of a tight end, and with Tyler Warren and everything
Yeah.
that they were able to do with him, I think it makes a lot of sense. And Minnesota sees him more as a linebacker. But that being said, there's no doubt that Peterson is one of the best athletes in the state of Minnesota. If you just look at what he did in the state track meet, I think he placed in 4 different events, which is for a kid who's 6'5", from anywhere from running to jumping. That's an incredible accomplishment. I mean, he's just one of those kind of rare athletes that you don't see too often in this state. But we'll see what he ends up deciding.
Yeah.
If you had to ask me right now, which you obviously are, I would tell you I think he's going to go to Penn State. But I
Yep.
know the Gophers and are still kind of awaiting a decision as we sit here.
Not only did they get the number 1 player in Minnesota, Ryan, they got the number 1 player in Wisconsin, which my executive producer is a Wisconsin guy, so he's probably going to mute you on this. But how big a deal was that to go and get Gavin Meyer out of Wisconsin?
Well, I'll also remind you, producer, this isn't the first time Minnesota has gone into the state of Wisconsin and landed the number 1 kid. And the previous one being Nathan Roy, who Minnesota could potentially be starting as a redshirt freshman at left tackle here this fall. So not only to rub a little bit of salt into the wound there, but it has been such an interesting kind of dynamic to look across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa here, because I think kids are changing. Where so many, even 5, 10, 15 years ago, it's you get this offer, you're a Wisconsin kid, you're going to the Badgers, you're going to Madison, or you're from the state of Iowa, you're going to go to the state of Iowa. Or even 5, 10 years ago, I'll be the first one to tell you, these Minnesota kids didn't always have an interest in staying home.
Nope.
Now, the kids are different today than they were certainly when I was in school, when you were in school, and I think everything continues to evolve. But Gavin Meyer, to have legitimate offer from Wisconsin, which he did among other schools, to choose Minnesota. I just talked to him here the other day as he was sitting out looking over 120 acres of ag, talking to me about some different gobblers and different deer he's shooting. I mean, he's a man after my own heart. He just really resonated with PJ Fleck compared to Luke Fickell. And that's the thing about PJ Fleck, that it's the number 1 question I get asked about him. What is PJ Fleck actually like? And as someone who has had more interactions with him with the camera on or off over the last now 9 years, the way I describe PJ Fleck is he's not 1 Red Bull. He is 5 Red Bulls all the time. The beautiful part about that is you either, for these kids specifically, within 5 minutes of meeting him, you want to run through a brick wall for him, or you want to run as far away as possible from him, which is the beautiful part about it. You don't have to kind of waste your time in terms of, if you want to play for him or you don't. And Gavin Meyer loved the PJ Fleck energy, and compared to Luke Fickell, certainly I think that played a part.
I got to ask you, North Dakota State for the class of 26, I believe now has 5 guys out of Minnesota, 4 out of the Twin Cities area. What have you seen from what the Bison have been able to do for the class of 26 so far?
Yeah, we were talking off air here. It is very interesting for me to see Tim Polasek and his staff down at Gopher camps.
Yeah.
I've seen them. Minnesota had 2 camps here, and there was a heavy Bison presence at both of them, which 5 years ago that would have never been the case.
That wasn't happening. Nope.
But NDSU is changing with the times, and they're coming down to these Minnesota camps where it's a lot easier to see these Twin Cities kids, and I like what they've done. I think probably my 2 favorite of them are both cornerback commits for the Bison, one being from Waseca and Darren Russell. He is one of the best athletes in the state. I mean, he is an outstanding basketball player. He's someone that I think has an opportunity to be an outstanding defensive back. He's not the biggest guy in the world, which is probably holding him off from some of the Power Four schools or regional schools here going on him. But I think he has an outstanding opportunity to be a great player for the Bison. And the same thing goes for Braden Dozier,
Yeah.
who is the son of a Gopher great, Yuki Dozier, someone that NDSU was able to see at one of the Gopher camps, and they immediately got him committed after. I know that he was dealing with a little bit of an injury during that Gopher camp, but he still persevered through it. But you got a couple of guys that have the ideal size. Maybe the speed isn't particularly at this moment in time power four worthy, but NDSU hasn't cared about that
No.
forever. They can coach that out. If I've learned anything about covering the Bison, it's that if they're an inch or two too short or a tenth or two too slow or whatever it may be, you never doubt the folks up in that strength and conditioning department up there to get the most out of whatever the kid is. So those are two of my favorites here from the Twin
Yeah,
Cities.
I know they were really excited about that. They got another corner out of Wisconsin and Kobe Russell that they got
Yes.
three really, really good corners out of this class that they are over the moon on. Last thing before I let you go, for the House settlement that's come down, how has that affected recruiting just in terms of what the Gophers now can go out and say about revenue share? Have you discerned that of how that's affecting recruiting now, knowing that this is going to be a reality come next Tuesday?
Yeah, it's certainly I feel like between the portal and now the portal's old news and now we got the
Yeah.
House settlement. Here's what I would say is I think across Big Ten football and across SEC football and just Minnesota football in general, I think the playing field is becoming as level as it has been. Now, that being said, the Ohio States still have a $20 million payroll, or the Texas is. They'll always have more money than everybody else, and that's just going to be the reality. But for a school like Minnesota, who can now have $14 million in addition to their NIL to pay these players, the thing we're going to find out here in the next 6, 12, 24 months is if they can just be in the ballpark, will that help them continue to retain players? Where Coy Parrish could have gone to a lot of different institutions here this offseason and gotten more money. But I can assure you, Coy Parrish is very well taken care of behind the scenes
Yeah.
because of the House settlement, because of NIL. And because of that, he's still on the roster at the University of Minnesota. Same things go for some of their other best players. So are we going to continue to find that if Minnesota can just be in the ballpark? Again, I don't ever expect them to be the highest bidder if they were to hit the open market in this instance. But because the House settlement will now allow a school like Minnesota to pay players, have this additional 14 million, you should be able to retain your best players. And then I'm very curious to see for a school like North Dakota State, we're talking about all these additional Power Four schools having 14
Right.
additional more millions of dollars. Now, I know that I believe it's the Green and Gold Collective in
Yep.
Fargo there. I know that they're doing their best, and I know every offseason it's going to be a worry, but it's going to be fascinating to see what happens at the FCS and Group of Five level to where if you're an all conference player or you're a really good player, everybody's got additional money to now throw around. And it's going to be an
Yeah.
interesting kind of thing to follow here throughout the next year or two.
It's great to see you, bud. Have a great summer, and we'll catch up again soon, okay?
All right, let's go Mets, baby.
We need a win sometime. Thanks, bud. Good to see you. There he goes.
Appreciate you.
Ryan Burns from Gopher Illustrated does an awesome job following everything Minnesota Gopher football recruiting related, and we'll find out on Petersone later today out of Triton if he's going to be a Gopher or he's heading to Penn State. We'll break. We come back. We'll wrap things up and get you ready for a busy Wednesday show. We'll do that when Hot Mike wraps right after this.